The rate of at-home births skyrocketed in 2021, 12% over the year before, hitting the highest level since 1990 when record-keeping started. Dr. Gregg Silverman joins us live to discuss why at-home births are not recommended and what to consider if you do decide to avoid a hospital. Dr. Silverman, always a pleasure. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning.
This kind of makes sense if it's during the pandemic and people are staying home and don't want to go to the hospital, so there's no room. Is that kind of what we're seeing?
I think that's kind of what happened. I think probably people said, look, the risk of me going to the hospital is worse than the risk of me having a birth at my house. I don't want to get sick from that. And remember, early on, we really didn't know what any of the long-term prognosis of getting COVID was. So the risk of going to the hospital was probably higher than the risk of having a child at home.
Well, we know when it comes to having a child at home, I would imagine you need to have a midwife or somebody there to assist with you. This isn't like something you just look up on YouTube or Google and try to figure out yourself.
This is not something that you just look up on YouTube. It's one of those things that the American Academy of Obstetrics and Gynecologists is suggesting you ought to have a couple things. You ought to probably take a class to say, okay, what is this? Certainly if it's your first time. You ought to have a midwife or somebody there in case there's a problem. You ought to be within about 20 minutes of a hospital, and it ought to be under certain conditions. That is, your first through your sixth. If you've never had a cesarean section before, you ought to know a little bit about that. That is, there ought to be some familiarity to it.
That's the thing. There's just so many things that could go wrong. I mean, yes, you hope for the best, but to at least notify your doctor this is the plan and kind of go through that action plan with them, I would think, too.
That's a really good idea. And have a plan in case something goes wrong. If there is a prolonged birth, or if there's too much pain, or if there's bleeding, it's time to go to the hospital.
Okay, Dr. Silverman, I appreciate you taking time to look into this study with us. It's not an everyday thing we talk about, but I thought it was unique enough that we should point out to our viewers that, hey, this is a big trend that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And again, they just started record keeping for this back in 1990, so I find that kind of interesting too. Dr. Silverman, thank you. We appreciate you. And if you have a question for the good doctor, all you need to do is text us to 361-855-6397.